Ex-wife cheated, left for her rich boss, got pregnant, now she wants me back after I inherited millions. So here's the situation, my ex-wife, Sabrina, who's 32, and I, 35, finalized our divorce about 6 months ago. And wouldn't you know it, within a month, she was pregnant. Sabrina and I were together for 3 years, married for about a year and a half, when she dropped the bombshell that she'd been having an affair. Her boss, Marcus, he's 42, was the guy, and apparently, this had been going on for a couple of months. We share a 1-year-old son, and when she confessed the affair, I was still trying to make sense of everything. But while I was processing, she had already lined up divorce papers and everything, ready to move on. Turns out Marcus had told her he was ready to marry her, and that was the green light she'd been waiting for. The only reason she hadn't left earlier was because she wasn't sure if he'd commit. The second she got the confirmation, she didn't hesitate, dumped me and our son, just like that, to run off with him. The divorce was pretty straightforward, all things considered. I wanted full custody of our son, and I got it. Sabrina didn't even put up a fight. She didn't contest anything else either. I ended up with everything we had. I suppose it made sense, with Marcus in her corner, she was now living the high life and didn't need anything from me. After the papers were signed, she disappeared from my life completely. I only heard bits and pieces from mutual friends, like the fact that she announced her pregnancy just weeks after our divorce was finalized. I have no idea how far along she is, but it's not my problem, she's out of my life for good. Emotionally, though, the divorce hit me hard. I had loved her, I really believed we had something real. During our time together, I noticed Sabrina had a bit of a materialistic side, but I never imagined it'd get in the way of our marriage. I've done well for myself as an oncologist, but Marcus is on another level. He owns the company where Sabrina worked, and I guess that kind of wealth was too tempting for her to resist. Even though they'd grown close while working together, I never saw him as a threat. I thought they were just friends, and I felt secure in our relationship because I truly believed she loved me back. Clearly, I was wrong. If she'd really cared, she wouldn't have left so easily. And it wasn't just me. How do you walk away from your own child like that? She hasn't checked on our son once since the divorce. That alone made it easier for me to resent her, which, frankly, she deserves. When she left, she tried to pin it on me, saying I never had time for her, unlike Marcus, who was always available. But I'm not an idiot. I know the real reason she left was because Marcus was richer. When I called her out on it, she flew off the handle, cussing me out and acting like I was some monster for even suggesting it, even though it was the truth. Anyway, fast forward to now. The only reason she's popped back into my life recently is, surprise surprise, because of money. A little context, I was recently named the sole heir to my late uncle's fortune. My uncle, a real estate mogul, built one of the largest real estate companies in the state. He never married or had kids, but we were close. I knew he cared about me, but I never expected him to leave everything to me. It's still being evaluated, but I know the estate alone is worth over $2 million, not to mention all his assets. He also left me his company, but I'm not interested in running it, so I've appointed his CFO as the new CEO to keep things running smoothly. I'll still benefit from the profits, though, so technically, I could retire right now. But I love my work too much to quit. Besides, with this kind of money, I can give back to society in bigger ways. But enough about my plans, let's talk about Sabrina's. Last week, I shared the news about my inheritance over dinner with a few friends. Most of them were genuinely happy for me, but I guess one of them wasn't because somehow, Sabrina found out. The very next day, she showed up at my house, heavily pregnant, saying she needed to talk. At first, I was ready to send her packing, but something told me to hear her out. It had been 6 months since the divorce, and I figured it had to be something serious if she was showing up now. At that moment, I didn't realize she already knew about my inheritance. She started with some small talk, but I wasn't interested. I kept my responses short, one word, if that. Then she congratulated me on the inheritance, which immediately raised a red flag. I figured one of my friends must have spilled the beans, but I didn't let on. I just thanked her. Then she asked about our son, which pissed me off. For 6 months, she acted like he didn't exist, and now she suddenly cares? I lost my temper. I'm just glad my son wasn't home, he was with my parents, because he didn't need to hear how I spoke to his mom. But honestly, I don't regret it. She deserved every word. When she asked about our son, I cut her off and told her to stop dancing around the point. I knew she wasn't here to make small talk or ask about things she clearly didn't care about. My patience was wearing thin, and I think she realized that because she finally got to the reason for her visit. She said she wanted to talk about the new addition to our family. I was caught off guard. As far as I knew, she was pregnant with her boss's baby, not mine. Back when we separated, she was adamant about the baby being Marcus's, and with everything else I was dealing with at the time, I didn't even question it. Honestly, I figured if there was any chance the baby was mine, a paternity test after birth would clear that up. Until then, I wanted nothing to do with her or the pregnancy, and I assumed she felt the same since she was so confident about Marcus being the father. So, when she called the baby a new addition to our family, I was floored. I asked her point-blank if she was certain about the paternity because, if the baby wasn't mine, I didn't see any reason to continue the conversation. But instead of answering directly, she said she hadn't done a paternity test yet and would only do it if I insisted. Then she hit me with her big idea: regardless of who the biological father was, she believed I had an equal right to the child since we were still married when it was conceived. That wasn't even the worst part. She went on to suggest that my name be added to the baby's birth certificate as the father. Her reasoning? It would be better for both kids to share the same last name. I didn't see that coming at all. It took me a minute to process what she was saying, and when it finally clicked, I couldn't help but laugh. Not because it was funny, but because the plan was so ridiculous it was almost comical. It didn't take much to connect the dots. She'd already slipped up and mentioned my inheritance, so it was obvious this was about securing her baby's future and likely her own. Now that I was wealthier than Marcus, her tone had completely shifted. I told her straight up that she was delusional if she thought I'd even consider going along with something like this. Then I told her to leave. But she didn't. She sat there, trying to reason with me. She said she was willing to do a paternity test, but she insisted it would be better for the children to have some kind of bond, and having the same last name would make that easier. She tried to frame it as if she genuinely cared about the relationship between our son and the baby. It was pathetic, honestly. She hadn't so much as checked on our son in the 6 months since the divorce, even though she had visitation rights. And now she was acting like it was crucial for the kids to have a strong connection? I called her out on it, telling her our son barely even had a mother, and now she wanted to play the concerned parent? Even if I agreed that our son should have some kind of relationship with his sibling or half-sibling, depending on the paternity, there was no reason for me to be listed as the baby's father if it wasn't biologically mine. I made it crystal clear, if the paternity test proved I was the father, I'd be willing to discuss things. But if I wasn't? Then I wanted no part in it. She kept pushing, insisting she was only thinking of the kids. But I knew better. This wasn't about the kids, it was about my money. I told her flat out that I wasn't stupid and she wasn't fooling me. Predictably, she didn't like being called out. She started yelling, claiming I was being unfair. But I was done. I told her to leave or I'd call the cops. That got her to finally leave. As she walked out, I could see the regret in her eyes. Maybe she was realizing what she'd lost. But to me, this was just karma coming back around. After she left, I couldn't shake how angry I felt. The audacity of her plan was almost insulting, like she thought I'd blindly agree to something so outrageous. If she had come to me asking for a paternity test so we could figure out the truth and go from there, I might have respected her approach. But trying to rope me into this nonsense about last names and birth certificates, all while sidestepping the actual question of paternity? That was never going to sit right with me. It was clear as day that her entire scheme revolved around securing a slice of my inheritance. She hadn't even bothered to craft a decent plan, just grasped at whatever straws she could find. I was furious. Up until that point, I hadn't done anything to get back at her, even though she had torn my life apart. But after her visit and the nonsense she tried to pull, I couldn't just sit back anymore. So, I decided to reach out to Marcus. I sent him an email explaining everything that had happened, every detail about her plan and how she'd tried to rope me into it. Honestly, I didn't care whether he already knew or if this would come as a shock to him. All I wanted was to cause some trouble for her, and emailing him felt like the only way to do it. I wasn't sure if it would work, but I got lucky. Turns out, Marcus had no idea what she was up to. He didn't reply to my email, no surprise there, but I found out through the grapevine that my message had sparked a massive fight between the two of them. And honestly, I don't blame him. Anyone in his shoes would have been furious. Instead of owning up to her actions or trying to fix things, though, Sabrina decided to shift the blame onto me. She's been on a rampage ever since, posting non-stop about how I've supposedly ruined her life. Not only that, but she's been going to all of our mutual friends, trying to get them to set the record straight with Marcus. Whatever that even means. As far as I'm concerned, I already set the record straight when I told him the truth. And thankfully, most of our friends agree. They think I did the right thing by exposing her. But here's the funny part, one of these so-called friends must have been the one who tipped her off about my inheritance in the first place. I haven't figured out who yet, but when I do, that'll be the end of that friendship. In the meantime, Sabrina has been working overtime trying to paint me as the bad guy. She's posted every day this week about how I'm jealous of her amazing life and bitter because she left me. She claims I'm lying to Marcus out of spite and that the only reason she came to see me was to visit our son who, according to her, I've been withholding from her. That's a blatant lie. I haven't stopped her from seeing him. In fact, she's the one who hasn't made an effort. And as for that day she came over? She didn't even mention our son until I called her out for using him as an excuse. Now she's trying to rewrite history, but I'm not going to play along. Her posts are getting on my last nerve, though. A handful of people who don't know me have been eating up her lies in the comment sections, offering her all the sympathy she's fishing for. I know she's doing this to try to salvage things with Marcus, but at the cost of my reputation? That's not fair. So, I've been considering putting the truth out there for everyone to see. I know it'll wreck her image completely, and Marcus will almost certainly leave her. They're only engaged, so it's not like they're tied together legally. Still, I've been hesitant because once I post it, there's no going back. Update. I decided to do it. I posted the full truth, unfiltered. I didn't even wait to read comments here before acting. My gut told me to just go for it, and I did. After posting, I unblocked her so she could see it. And let me tell you, the fallout has been satisfying. Most of our mutual friends are backing me up, which means a lot. Honestly, their support feels like validation, not that I needed it, but it's good to know I'm not the crazy one here. Sabrina, on the other hand, is fuming. She hasn't been able to drum up the sympathy she was hoping for. From what I've heard, she's even had to move back in with her parents because Marcus doesn't want her living with him anymore. It's been just over a week since I sent him that email, and while he hasn't responded to me, it's clear there's serious trouble in paradise. Good. I won't deny it feels like karma finally catching up to both of them. She left me and our son for Marcus because he was richer than I was at the time. And Marcus? He's just a homewrecker. They deserve whatever's coming to them. But honestly, I'm not letting this drama consume me anymore. My son and I are planning a much-needed vacation in a couple of weeks. I've been working like crazy ever since the divorce, and now that I've gotten the closure I didn't even know I needed, I think it's time to hit pause and enjoy life a little. When we get back, I'll be ready to hit the ground running again. With or without them in my life, I'll be fine. Rich, happy, and surrounded by people who truly matter. The one thing that still puzzles me is who spilled the beans to Sabrina about my inheritance. I've asked several of my friends, people I deeply trust, and every single one of them has denied saying anything. These are folks I've known for years, people I consider family, so the thought of one of them lying to my face is a hard pill to swallow. But it is what it is, I suppose. Anyway, I'm shifting my focus now. My son and I have started planning our vacation, and I'm looking forward to some much-needed time away. Update 2. Sabrina showed up at my door again today. This time, my son was home, so I immediately told her to leave. I wasn't in the mood to deal with her nonsense, and I didn't want my son exposed to the tension she always brings. She has a way of bringing out the absolute worst in me, and I'll be the first to admit I don't handle it well. But she refused to go. She claimed she was there to see our son and reminded me that she has visitation rights, so legally, I couldn't stop her. She wasn't wrong, so I had no choice but to let her in. I hated it, but I've been careful to avoid any legal missteps, and this wasn't a hill I wanted to die on. I've already spoken to my lawyer about this issue, and we're working on a petition for supervised visitation. It's not that I don't want her in our son's life. I'd love for him to have a healthy relationship with both his parents. But the way she comes and goes as she pleases is disruptive. When she first left to move in with Marcus, she didn't even bother saying goodbye to our son. He struggled so much in the weeks that followed, and I don't ever want him to go through that again. With supervised visits, I can ensure there's some structure, and she won't be able to waltz in and out of his life whenever it suits her. When Sabrina walked in, our son was a little confused at first. But soon enough, he seemed happy to see her, which was good. She didn't say a word to me the entire time she was there, but toward the end of her visit, I noticed her taking a bunch of videos. Before she left, I told her I didn't want any of those videos posted online. I don't want our son to have an online presence while he's so young. Her response? She claimed the videos were just for her, so she could watch them when she missed him. I called BS on that, but I didn't argue, it wasn't worth it. She left soon after, and while the whole thing fell off, there wasn't much I could do about it. Update 3. After her last visit, I asked my lawyer to move forward with the petition for supervised visitation. But after what happened last night, I don't think that's going to be necessary anymore. Here's the thing, Sabrina has been unusually quiet. After I shared my side of the story online, she made a few more posts targeting me, but then she just stopped. For someone who thrives on drama, her silence was strange. And then she showed up to visit our son, which was even stranger. But last night? Last night, she outdid herself. She showed up at my house unannounced again, but this time, she brought a lawyer. They handed me signed paperwork stating that she was giving up custody of our son. She explained that they'd be filing the petition with the family court soon, but she wanted to let me know ahead of time so I wouldn't be blindsided. I couldn't stop myself from asking why. Just a couple of days ago, she'd been here to see our son, so what had changed? She didn't give me a straightforward answer. All she said was that she decided it was in our son's best interest to have only one parent me. Her reasoning? She claimed she was going to be too busy taking care of her future child, and seeing our son during her last visit had made her realize he was better off without her. She said he didn't seem particularly attached to her, and, worse, that she didn't feel anything for him either. She wanted me to take full responsibility for him and promised she wouldn't bother us anymore. I stood there, stunned. Part of me wanted to believe this was some twisted ploy, but the way she said it, it felt final. I couldn't shake the sadness that washed over me, not for myself, but for my son. He's too young to understand what her words mean, but one day he will. And when that day comes, it'll hurt. For now, I just have to keep being both parents for him. He deserves better than what Sabrina's offering, and I'll do everything in my power to give him that. I didn't try to stop her. No matter how I felt about the situation, Sabrina had made up her mind. If she didn't want to be a mother, there was nothing I could do to change that. And, to be fair, she was right about one thing: our son is better off with just one parent who's fully committed to him. That parent is me. I've always been willing to step up and be the father he deserves, and I'll continue to do that. Before Sabrina left, I asked if she had any updates on the paternity of her baby. She told me she planned to get a paternity test done after the baby was born and that I had nothing to worry about in the meantime. If it turned out the baby was mine, she said we could work out an arrangement then. Until that point, she didn't want me to contact her. Honestly, I was fine with that. I've got more than enough on my plate already, and worrying about a child that likely isn't mine is not something I have the bandwidth for right now. Update 4. It's been almost 4 weeks since I sent that email to Marcus, but I finally heard back from him. And let me tell you, what he shared shed a whole new light on everything. He started by apologizing for everything. I won't get into the details of that because, frankly, it's not important. What mattered was what he told me next. Apparently, they did a paternity test a couple of weeks ago, and it's confirmed, the baby is his, not mine. The kicker? Sabrina already knew that before she came to see me. Marcus was livid when he found out because it proved what kind of person she really is. She tried to convince him that she'd only visited me to discuss seeing our son more often, claiming I wasn't allowing her access. But Marcus didn't buy it. He said that for the past 6 months, he'd been urging her to visit our son, and she kept putting it off. The sudden change in her behavior just didn't add up. So, he ended their engagement and asked her to move out. Even after she left, she tried to salvage the situation. She sent him a few videos of our son, likely the one she recorded during her last visit, trying to prove she wasn't lying about wanting to be more involved. But Marcus is not a fool. He saw right through her manipulative tactics. At least now I understand why she was so insistent on taking those videos during her visit. It wasn't for memories or because she missed him. It was all just part of her scheme to convince Marcus she was still trying to be a good mother. Using our son like that, weaponizing him for her own agenda, is one of the most disgusting things I've ever witnessed. When her plan didn't work, she gave up custody altogether. Marcus told me they still plan to raise their child together, though Sabrina is already demanding an outrageous amount of child support from him. That doesn't surprise me. She quit her job after they got engaged, so now she's banking on Marcus to fund her lifestyle. But that's their mess to sort out. I'm done with her and her games. Now, I'm focused on the future. The process of finalizing sole custody of my son is nearly complete, and so is my inheritance. Soon, I'll officially take over everything my uncle left me, and life is going to change for the better. 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined being where I am today. Back then, everything felt like it was falling apart. But now, I feel like I'm finally getting the fresh start my son and I deserve. And honestly, I couldn't be happier with how things have turned out.